Welcome to Sharp Football Analysis. Today, Rich and I are going to talk about the 4 divisional round games from a fantasy perspective, maybe some betting thrown in there, so make sure you stick around. What is up, everybody? This is Sharp Football Analysis. I am Ray. He's Rich, and we're here to talk about the divisional round, all 4 divisional round games from a DFS and betting angle to get you ready for this great weekend of football, one of the best weekends of football that we have coming up for us. Before we do that, though, I do want to mention that right now you get all of our betting recommendations, all of our Sharp Football Analysis betting recommendation and exclusive analysis, which includes Rich's worksheet previews. He has written a preview of every single one of these games. We're going to get into all these games, but there's a lot more available at Sharp Football Analysis. That's all part of our postseason package. And right now you can get our postseason package for 60% off using promo code SAVE60. When you buy this, you'll also get our 50-plus page Super Bowl preview written by the boss, Warren Sharp. It gives you everything you could possibly want to know about the Super Bowl. It comes out the Tuesday before the Super Bowl, so you have a long time to read up, have every piece of information you want heading into Super Bowl weekend to make any bets, play any DFS angles you'd like to play. So all of that is available. You get it 60% off using promo code SAVE60. Head over to sharp.football to check that out. And also, just as an aside with the podcast, since you're listening to us now, subscribe to the podcast wherever you find us, podcast player of choice, YouTube, turn on notifications on YouTube. We're going to have a lot of content between now and the Super Bowl, and especially that Super Bowl week, talking about those betting angles and just what we're looking at as we head into that last football game of the 2025 NFL season. So make sure you're with us for that. But before we get into the divisional round, I do want to look back a little bit at the wild card round, Rich, and think, we had a really fun week of games. The last 2 games were not as good as some of the other ones that we watched, but we started with a great, college football game on Thursday night. We had 2 great games on Saturday, one great game on Sunday, and then, a game that we're like, it is sometimes you got to snuff someone out. What are you going to do? But I think overall it was a really good weekend. Do you have any big takeaways coming out of that weekend of football action?
Not necessarily just takeaways, just like everyone else enjoyed the games. Those first 4 wild card games were all decided with a touchdown scored at 3 minutes or less remaining in the game. The other 2 games were more fist fights, but they weren't at least close games, at least for most in the second half. So at least they held your attention, and, you were kind of waiting to see what was going to happen. Both teams were live. It never really felt like the Chargers or Steelers were going to win those games, but they were still live to a certain point to where you're like, well, if something weird happens, and then the weird things happen, obviously, all for the Texans at the end of that game. And, because that game was 7-6 in the fourth quarter, and you look at the box score and you're like, oh, wow, Steelers got blown out. But those 2 defensive touchdowns swung a lot. But more so just like when you remember from a DFS angle that these are short slates and you almost treat them adjacent to like showdown stuff. I mean, you look at there were 700-yard receivers last week, and they were, Colston Loveland, Romeo Dobbs, Jalen Coker, Demarcus Robinson, right? Like, you have to still play these on like an angle of like, you're going to get these long shots and these flyers that you have to. I mean, Matthew Golden was dusted off. He didn't have 100 yards, but he had a touchdown. You remember he was on the team. Had an awesome touchdown too. It was a great play. But yeah, you're going to have to take some chances, I think, in DFS on these short slates and play some guys who inherently are like tougher clicks.
No, absolutely. And I mean, you can even get into like, I don't think anybody, well, some people obviously got to Demarcus Robinson, but most people were not getting to Demarcus Robinson. But there were strong signals for Coker. Coker was a guy I liked last week. We always make the point with Romeo Doubs is that even though it hadn't been the case as much, he's going to be on the field. And so if he's going to be on the field with an offense that we like, that's interesting. I wonder on the Golden thing, we get this stat rolled out there about first-round wide receivers who didn't catch a touchdown as a rookie. Are we still going to get that Golden stat rolled out there now that he caught one in the playoffs? Are they only going to count the regular season? I don't know. We'll have to see how the Golden haters handle that whenever we get into pure off-season mode for sure. I guess my overall wildcard thought is are there any good teams? Which I think was my thought heading into the playoffs, which is still
2025 football.
Yeah, like it is so fun. The reason why these playoffs are so fun is because it is completely wide open. I think you could make a case for really any of the teams that we have left in this. Obviously there's a weaker case, I think, for the Texans, and we can get into some of the struggles we saw from them on offense. Probably not going to have Nico Collins this week. There's probably a weaker case for the Bears, but no longer betting ever against the Bears because apparently they are inevitable. The Bears are getting me to believe in the Pope. That is how far.
Well, you just got to take if you're going to bet against the Bears, you have to cut it off at the first half only.
Absolutely. No, it's the Bears. You do Rams first half, Bears complete game. You just parlay that, and you have a really good time with it. But yeah, I do think we're still in this like wide open space where I think the Rams are still really good, but their defense is not doing well. I think the Broncos probably have the best top to bottom roster when I look at it, but we have questions about the quarterback, and they're playing Josh Allen, who, as it turns out, is really good. The Patriots are probably a little bit underrated, I would say, on defense. So maybe they're the answer. But yeah, there are lots of questions here, and we're down to our last 8, and we still have a lot of questions. And that's just, it's fun. It's a good time, I think, would be the way I look at these playoffs.
And just we only have one big spread this week. That's a touchdown or higher. I mean, that 49ers Seahawks game has been like 7.5, and the rest are a lot shorter spreads, which we don't actually see a lot, which is kind of surprising. In the divisional round, just 12 times since 2002, which is the year the NFL went to 32 teams, which is why I say that. People are like, why 2002? But like that's when they went to 32 teams. We've only had 12 teams that have been, favorites of less than a field goal. So like it's not very often that we get like these tight spreads like you would inherently think when we get to this round of the playoffs. So we've got a couple of those this week, obviously, with the Patriots game being 3 points. This Denver game's kind of floated around 1 point in either direction in a pick 'em. And then the Bears game's gone down a little bit too. It's not quite into that umbrella, but it's gone down. It's 3.5 now in most places. But like last week when we talked about the 7 seeds, because the 7 seeds had like their closest margin of that we had ever seen. It's this structure of the 2025 NFL season. There's just the parity rules. This is what's happened this year in football.
And you wrote a little bit in your kind of State of the Union, as I call it, every week with the worksheet about some of the against the spread trends in this. And it is interesting that home teams have been very good, just straight up. Home teams very regularly win, which again makes sense. They're the higher seeds. They're generally the better teams. But against the spread, they haven't been as good. I believe you have in here that they're 41-50-1 against the spread. I imagine that's since 2002. I didn't look at the date. But like you said, it's a little bit different this year because we don't have those big spreads. Mm-hmm. So if the home teams do win outright, then if they're, if the Broncos are 1.5 point favorites, so they win outright, it's very likely that they're going to cover that spread. Obviously they could win by 1. People miss extra points now. Like I get it, but still, if a team is favored by 1.5 and they win outright, they generally are going to win against the spread too. So we could see something of a reversal of that trend. But of course, one of those short like spreads is from a home team as an underdog, which is the Bears as an underdog, like you said, in minus plus 3.5. And home underdogs have been very good in this round and in this situation. So could we see a split there as well? So it's just an interesting layout overall when you're looking at the spread history and then what we're getting this year.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we've only had 4 home underdogs this round since that same 2002, the expansion, and they're 3-1, straight up. It's just like you said, it's just very rare. Usually, obviously the number 1 seeds are playing this round. We almost had our second number 1 seed underdog ever, but then it swung back to the Broncos' favor. But did open as
kickoff. Yeah,
I guess. Yeah, you're right. 100%. But the only other team that was a number 1 seed that was an underdog this round was the 2017 Eagles, and that's the year Wentz got hurt at the end of the year. That was the Nick Foles run. But
how'd they do that year? How did that work out?
Seemed to work out all right. I think Nick Foles is a statue, so so it's working out all right. But yeah, that's what would keep the Bears live. I mean, and you look at the Rams, and we'll get into that game when we talk about it, like the way this Rams defense is playing. And listen, the Rams, it almost happened again. They're the worst special teams of anybody in the playoffs. Like it almost got them again last week. So those are like the outs you're looking for in these games where you're looking to pull off these upsets.
I'll never forget that Eagles Super Bowl because I watched it at an all-inclusive resort in Cancun because one of my friends got married the Saturday.
The Falcons game or the Super Bowl?
The Super Bowl, because my friend got married the Saturday before the Super Bowl. So it's a bunch of mid-30s hungover dudes trying to watch a football game on a small television. It was a good time. I really enjoyed that Super Bowl.
The Super Bowl is phenomenal.
It was a great game. Yeah, it was
a great game. And the thing about the Super Bowl, when we talk about the adjacent to these playoffs, is like you have these kind of guys that can come out of nowhere, like not necessarily like Coker and Loveland, those guys didn't come out of nowhere, but like DeMarcus Robinson last week, right? Like would be an example. And that Super Bowl had one of the infamous guys, Corey Clement, like the best game of his career, that game.
Yeah, absolutely. But I do think, like, if we're looking forward to the Super Bowl, the general parity that we have this year is really a strong sign for what we're going to see the rest of the way. And hopefully we're going to get good games the rest of the way. Before we get to those games, though, before we start talking about it, let's bring in Warren Sharp so we can talk about our PrizePicks lineup for the divisional round.
It's time for us to build this week's PrizePicks lineup and turn $100 into $600. PrizePicks is the best place to win cash while watching sports with their easy-to-use app. And now you can play $5 and get $50 instantly in lineups when you use code Warren after you download their app. All right, we are back with another PrizePicks lineup, taking 3 players, putting them in a lineup and looking to turn $100 into $600. As a reminder, if you want to follow us, which we've been cleaning up on these of late, if you want to follow us, make sure that you use the link below. You'll get the app, use code Warren. You'll get $50 in lineups instantly as soon as you play your first $5 lineup. So great opportunity for you there. Let's start talking about the 3 players that we're looking to add to our lineup. And we'll start with Bo Nix, and we're looking at his longest rush of more than 12.5 yards. And this one sounds a little, why do we want to take Bo Nix for this one? Well, if you look at some of the quarterbacks that have gone up against this Buffalo Bills defense, a lot of these guys, if they're willing runners, they are definitely getting over this number. Last week, Trevor Lawrence had a long of 18, and you go down through some of these other guys. No, Brady Cook didn't get there in week 18, but Shedeur Sanders got there in week 16. Drake May got there in week 15. No, Davis Mills didn't get there, but Baker Mayfield got there the week before that. No, Tua didn't get there. No, Andy Dalton didn't get there. No, Michael Penix didn't get there, but Drake May got there. Spencer Rattler got there. Justin Fields got there. The list goes on and on. Quarterbacks that are willing to take their opportunities to try to scramble against Sean McDermott's defense have had some success. Sean McDermott is utilizing a lot of disguise from pre-snap to post-snap and is making quarterbacks hold on to the football a little bit longer. And I absolutely love what Sean Payton has said this past week about turnovers. They do not want negative plays. They already run an offense that really accentuates avoiding the negatives, whether it's sacks or whether it's throwing interceptions for Bo Nix. And as a result, he's encouraged not to fire it into tight coverage down the field, but to take off and run with the football to avoid a sack or to avoid an interception. And that's why some of his rushing numbers have increased down the tail end of the season, as they did the tail end of last season. And he definitely went over this in the wild card game against these very same Buffalo Bills last year. The Broncos lost that game on the road. Bo Nix sailed over his rushing numbers, including his longest. All we need is one run of at least 13 yards. Okay, next up, we're staying in the same game, and we're looking at Khalil Shakir to have more than 5.5 receptions. Now, you can see by the graphic that he hasn't been hitting this with regularity, but everything has changed for the Buffalo Bills. Literally everything with this receiving core. They have no receivers. Their best target probably out of Khalil Shakir, outside of Khalil Shakir, is their tight end Dalton Kincaid, who clearly is banged up and is not at 100%. Last week's game against the Jacksonville Jaguars showcased that. You look at the other guys, they've lost so many receivers. They have 3 healthy receivers on the roster. They're calling up other guys. Brandon Cooks, who we did like last week, we thought his numbers were a little bit too low, who went over those last week, is going to be playing on the outside. This is a very difficult place to play against this Denver Broncos defense. He catches targets deeper down the field. The Broncos are one of the best defenses in the entire NFL, defending deeper passes outside the boundary. So this is going to be a tough spot for Brandon Cooks to have a lot of success down the field. It's going to put even more emphasis on the underneath stuff to Khalil Shakir. In addition, Josh Allen under pressure from a good pass rush of the Denver Broncos, going to have to get rid of the ball quicker. In my opinion, I'm thinking of the game that he played against the Houston Texans, where Khalil Shakir, even with other receivers there, had 8 receptions on 10 targets. And this was a game where Shakir was far from 100%. He was basically catching the ball and falling over because he was so banged up. The difference is here he's actually healthy. I think he's going to be heavily utilized. He had 12 targets and 12 catches last week against the Jacksonville Jaguars. I'm not suggesting he has 12 plus, but I do think he's going to have at least 6 for us to go more than 5.5. Last but not least, to round this out, we've got Woody Marks going up against this New England Patriots run defense with Milton Williams to have less than 12.5 for his longest rushing attempt. This is an interesting one. Milton Williams has been injured, but he's back with the New England Patriots. The New England Patriots have faced 123 rushing attempts with Milton Williams on the field. They have allowed exactly 1 run out of 123 to be 13 plus yards. That's all you really need to say. Woody Marks played his best game of the year last year. Everybody was raving about how solid he performed against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Different story here going on the road. Also might be a different game script. Last game around, it was an easy game script. You're playing with a lead almost the entire game against the Pittsburgh Steelers and Aaron Rodgers, and your defense is scoring touchdowns. It's an easy opportunity for you to have success running the football. More rushing attempts leads to more opportunities to go over a longest. But in this particular game, they're the underdogs, and they might not have nearly as much success in New England. So Marks longest under 12.5. This is our 3-player lineup, looking to turn $100 into $600. If you want to join us in this pursuit, click the link in the description below. Make sure that you use code Warren when you download the PrizePicks app, and you can get $50 in lineups when you enter your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks available in a ton of states, including California and Texas. Take advantage of the opportunity. Take advantage of utilizing this lineup, and let's go get something.
All right, let's get to the games. Let's start talking about the games. The reason we're all here. First game of the weekend, we've got Buffalo traveling to Denver. It's a 46-point total. And as we mentioned, as we're recording this on Thursday morning, the Broncos are -1.5, but that has jumped around a lot. I think the first talking point here, and it's interesting, is because we saw these two teams play in the playoffs last year, right? And we saw Buffalo just absolutely steamroll a Denver team that was a surprise last year, that they had risen to the level that they were last year. It was a surprise. This year they come in with expectations. They meet those expectations. They exceed those expectations. I think we can say they end up as the number 1 seed. And I wonder can we look back at that game last year and say, okay, are we going to see something similar happen, even though it is in Denver instead of in Buffalo? Are we looking back at that game and saying, well, these are 2 completely different teams in 2 completely different places, and we're not going to put a ton of stock into it?
Yeah, it's a little tough, right? Because you have 2 teams. Anytime you talk about these teams that play each other, it's always tough to go back. Like, you're seeing this a lot with the Stafford stuff, like Stafford and the cold, and they're bringing up some game that happened like 8 years ago.
Yeah,
and like how it's like predictive for this. I always struggle with that. It's why I don't use a lot of like the like batter versus pitcher type stats for like NFL stuff. It's like because it's usually different rosters. This one did happen last year, but the Bills are in a different spot. It was Bo Nix's first career playoff game. I'm always kind of cautious on these first time playoff starters. We did have 2 win last week in Caleb Williams and Bo Nix. So it's tough to like pull a lot from it. I think structurally they're like Denver's defense they were great last year, and then they kind of had trouble in this game. It was 13-7 midway through the third quarter. It's like they were kind of keeping it tight and then just couldn't hold on, and it kind of opened up and the final score got to where it was. Denver this year is very interesting. This is a team that led the NFL with 11 wins in 1-score games, and a lot of people think it was the Bears, but the Bears pull off all those fourth quarter games. They trailed 15 times this season in 15 games. They won 8 games where their opponent scored first. They won 5 games while trailing in the second half this season. The Bears did edge them in that one. That was second in the NFL, and they had 5 wins when trailing in the fourth quarter. Obviously, second to the Bears. They play a lot of tight games. And it's because like their offense has just been so inconsistent this year. I mean, you look at the Broncos, they punted on 40% of their possessions. That's 28th in the league. 38% of their possessions didn't even gain a first down. That was 26th in the league. And 25% of their possessions went 3 plays and then a punt. That was 29th in the league. What save Denver though is like they're a team that just like doesn't beat themselves and like are predicated on defense. Like they only had 2.2 plays per game that were a sack or a turnover, which is third in the NFL. The number 1 and 2 teams are playing each other on Sunday night, by the way, which makes that game even a lot more fun if you think that game can shoot out and go over. There's no goofy weather stuff. But so like their offense just didn't beat themselves and they relied on that defense. Denver first in the league in success rate, league low yards per play. They allow their third in points per drive. They allow the lowest touchdown rate per drive. So this game could be kind of like one of these games where it's just tight. Like Sean Payton just asked Bo Nix, don't lose us the game. And like, we'll try to have the defense that'll keep us in a position to win games. And the Bills have like played that way structurally kind of all year as well. So that's what makes this game kind of set up to be kind of like one of those games that could be low scoring and tight. And we can kind of get into the weeds of some of the matchups. But that's my top down thoughts is like, it is going to be a game that's lower scoring and very tight.
I do think it's interesting from that perspective because I agree with you, but also this offense has had to lean a lot more on Bo Nix following the J.K. Dobbins injury and like put much more on his plate just because RJ Harvey and the run offense just can't make anything happen. And will that change this week? Did they have time over the bye to recalibrate some things? Obviously, we talked last week about, well, maybe Buffalo's run defense is better than it has been. And then they came out and, the Jaguars probably should have run a lot more than they did last week because they were having a ton of success doing that. But, if this Denver run offense has not been anything you can bet on. So are they going to have to lean more on Bo Nix? What are we going to see out of this offense from that perspective, do you think?
And the pass game is the run game, to be honest. Yeah. I mean, when you look at the way Sean Payton runs this offense and with Bo Nix, and we talk about just like the reason Bo Nix doesn't have necessarily a lot of turnovers is that they don't really push the ball downfield like a lot, right? And Bo Nix hasn't really been successful on that either. But 25% of his throws are at or behind the line of scrimmage. That's 27th in the NFL. Only 28% of his throws are 10 or more yards downfield. That's 30th in the NFL. So like their passing game is the run game. Like we're going to see, Marvin Mims, quick hitters, right? Troy Franklin, quick hitters, a lot of stuff near the line of scrimmage to kind of compensate for that run game. The run game, I think, is the most interesting part of this matchup because like you said, like we did see Jacksonville have more success running the football than more teams have had recently. And they did so in a different capacity than teams had success against the Bills during the regular season. The Bills during the regular season were just gashed on the interior. We talked about they had injury, Ed Oliver's hardly played. Daquan Jones was in and out of the lineup. They were playing 2 rookies on the inside. And the Jaguars just beat them up on the edges like the entire game. They ran 12 times for 106 yards with running backs off both tackles, just under 9 yards per carry. Interesting enough, like that's where RJ Harvey's had a lot of his struggles, which you wouldn't have thought like from his profile coming out of college and that Gus Malzahn scheme, right? Like we want to use RJ Harvey at UCF to out athlete a lot of these other guys, spread them out, and then he's going to out athlete these guys. But he's been really struggled on those corner store runs this year. Only 3.4 yards per carry off either edge this year. That's 46 out of 49 running backs, 100 carries. 5.1 yards per carry on the interior. Now, some of that's inflated by the longer runs. Like you think of that Jacksonville run he had a couple weeks ago. That's an interior run. He had one against Tennessee earlier in the year where you can hit that tarmac, get to the second level, and then he's using his athleticism. So it's going to be interesting to see how this Denver run offense, approaches this game because they've just been so inconsistent since the loss of J.K. Dobbins because RJ Harvey is like this strikeout type of runner, right? Again, like you said, I can pull that one in for you. You like that one, but yeah, out of 49 running backs with 100 more carries this year, I mean, he's 42nd in yards per carry, 41st in success rate, 47th in explosive run rate, 39th in stuff rate, and 42nd in yards after contact. The loss of J.K. Dobbins has pushed this team to throw the football more. Since J.K. Dobbins has been out, the Denver Broncos have thrown the ball 7.6% over pass rate expectations. Only the Arizona Cardinals threw the ball at a higher rate over expectations than the Broncos over that span. So the Denver run game and how they calibrate like around the success or on the less success they have of that run game is, I think, going to be the key of Denver kind of winning this game.
I agree with that, but I do think, like you said, with there are some opportunities here in the pass game and get big plays and we get Marvin Mims or Franklin on the edge, but really Courtland Sutton and getting Courtland Sutton going, because if we're throwing those downfield targets, a lot of times they're going to be to Sutton. And you look at this Bills defense, they lost Jordan Poyer. It doesn't seem like he's going to play. It doesn't seem like Hairston's going to play. They just have these injuries in the secondary. And you mentioned it in the write-up that Tre'Davious White, found the fountain of youth in the last game and really had a lot of success. But I do wonder if this is a really good Sutton spot, and we're going to get a really nice game out of Cortland Sutton, pushing down the field, opening up more of that underneath stuff for Brian and Franklin and Mims and Harvey, frankly, as an extension of the running game, him just catching passes as well. So Sutton, I'm really interested in this week, because if you're going to pin and say, all right, who's the Denver wide receiver I'm chasing? Like you mentioned at the top, if we're talking DFS, you got to take shots on all of those guys. Maybe not Bryant. We haven't really seen him earn those targets, but at least he's on the field, right? You got to take shots on Franklin because he does earn targets when he's on the field. Mims, I just can't do it anymore. But if you're like trying to...
he might return a punt for you. Maybe you get a special teams touchdown too.
Evan Ingram's not going to be on the field enough. And obviously, the Bills have been good against tight ends too. So, you're not really chasing that. But Sutton is that guy that you go, all right, if we're going to have a lot of success, if Bo Nix going to have a lot of success, we're probably going to get some big plays out of Cortland Sutton in this game.
And well, on Sutton too, like he is also the last 2 years in this offense been more of an intermediate to shallow target earner too. He hasn't been the old like Cortland Sutton of the early careers where it's just like he has to win one-on-one on the boundary. He has been a nuanced receiver. And like you said, it's really about the playing time. I do think we'll see with the amount of injuries the Bills have on the back end. And Sean McDermott's always a heavy like zone coverage, disguise coverage guy. He got Trevor Lawrence twice last week post snap. We're going to see, I think, the Bills play a lot of coverage in this game just to kind of insulate the player, because they're going to have to bring either DeMar Hamlin up or Darnell Savage, who they added to the roster like 4 weeks ago, up in this game. Like Jordan Hancock came in last week, he was active, but immediately when he had to play, he gave the most receiving yards of any Bills secondary player in the game last week. I'd be surprised if he even is out there as many snaps as he was last week. I think they might try to rotate some of these guys in. And then if Hairston doesn't play, it's just tough to really count on. Like Tre'Davious White, the body of work this week has largely been poor. He dialed it up, made those 3 huge plays in that game. The larger sample suggests that won't happen, and that sometimes happens in an isolated playoff game. But going back to the Denver Broncos wide receivers, we've seen them at the end of the year kind of go back to this. Cortland Sutton is on the field every snap. He was on the field for 92% of the Denver dropbacks, and then we're going to rotate everyone else around him. We're going to mix these guys in based on the play call, whether that be Pat Bryant, Troy Franklin, Marvin Mims, and a little bit of little Jordan Humphrey. And then they do that same thing with the tight end. So you're getting just the guy that's going to be on the field the most. And we've talked about just how they have had to throw the ball at a higher pass rate over expectation. And that's why Sutton has had double-digit targets in 4 of his past 5 games.
Find you someone that loves you like Sean Payton loves little Jordan Humphrey. That's all I'll say. That's my romantic.
And Adam Troutman, like dude loves Adam Troutman, man.
Loves Adam Troutman. Good for both of them. I'm happy for both of them. We kind of got on to talking about the Broncos, so I let it go that way. But it does seem ridiculous that we've gotten this far in this game. We haven't talked about Super Josh Allen, who obviously showed himself last week. We kind of talked about it. We expected them to have a higher drop back rate against the Jaguars, and that's what we saw. Although I will say this morning we're talking with the boss Warren Sharp, and he wonders if we see that pull back this week, which does make some sense given, like you said, how Denver approaches things, that we could see a slower approach, a more methodical approach out of both of these teams, which maybe we get back to more of the Bills offense we saw over the second half of the season.
I think that's what they're going to try to do. I mean, they really kind of leaned on their offensive line size versus the size of the Denver offense. I mean, all of these Bills offensive linemen are like 320 plus, and the Broncos have one like 290 pound plus like the front 7 player. So they're a little lighter. They play with a lot more speed, but they've been really good against the run all season. I mean, only Jonathan Taylor had over 75 yards. It's a very similar setup to last week against the Jaguars. It's just that they used their size in this matchup last season. Cook rushed 23 times for 120 yards in this game. So it's really about keeping the game script tight to kind of let James Cook kind of stack those opportunities in this game. But Bills have been kind of battle tested against like really good run defenses. This will be their 8th top 10 run defense they faced all season. In the previous 7, James Cook has been held below 50 yards in 4 of the 7 matchups. He's also gone over 100. So it's like there's been no middle ground. He's either gone over 100 yards or they've really kind of pushed the Bills to kind of throw the ball. But I do think there is a risk of the Bills getting pushed to being one-dimensional here that I don't think favors them in the same way it did last week. I think they're going to need that balance. If James Cook is running, that's what the Bills need. If we were never really worried about them getting to be one-dimensional last week because we talked about the Jaguars back end being the most vulnerable component of their defense. That's not the case here. Like, you don't want to get pushed in just a drop back game against the Denver Broncos when your best pass catchers are Khalil Shakir and Dalton Kincaid, because you
injured Dalton Kincaid.
Yeah, I mean, you do not want to be coming in here with Brandon Cooks, Keon Coleman now being forced to play because of the injuries to Josh Palmer and Tyrell Shavers and Gabe Davis, potentially, you know, Curtis Samuel or McCole Hardman now getting elevated. If you're in a pure drop back game against this Denver Broncos team, even with Josh Allen, it's tough to like really believe to think that that's advantageous for the Bills. So just structurally here. So James Cook, I think, is a huge component of Buffalo, you know, operating in a compartmentalized structure to where they're playing, you know, complementary football and then playing the kind of offense they want. If the Broncos get up early in this game and force them, I know that, like, you know, Super Josh is going to come out and Josh Allen's going to do is put the cape on, but any of these teams that can get pressure on Josh Allen without having to blitz and then have kind of good back ends, this has been the recipe against the Bills this year. I mean, Houston Texans, Cleveland Browns, Philadelphia Eagles, the first Patriots game. Like, if you can pressure Josh Allen and force them into a drop back game without having the run game, this is the recipe. This is how you beat the Buffalo Bills this year. So, like, that's where the Broncos have to steer this game.
And I wonder if that also means we see a lot more, like we did last week, short passes, Khalil Shakir. We see Shakir just be a PPR monster like he was last week. And then you brought up Kincaid. Kincaid's just not healthy. And so I think that aspect of it, more even so than the losses at receiver, because when we're talking about the losses at receiver, we're talking about, you know, Gabe Davis, we're talking about Josh Palmer, who obviously we have a soft spot. I have a soft spot for Josh Palmer, but we're not talking about like high end guys that they're losing. I think that injury to Dalton Kincaid and the fact that he's not right, that he was in a walking boot, even though he had been dealing with a knee injury after last week's game, that to me is much more important when we're thinking about, can they actually effectively attack this team than these wide receiver injuries? Because, I mean, is there a massive difference between Curtis Samuel coming off injured reserve or Josh Palmer? I don't really think so. So that's more the...
Well, Shavers is big because he's their best run blocker as the wide receiver. And if Keon Coleman has to play that role more, because like Samuel's not going to go out there and play that position, like Keon Coleman, it actually makes the run game worse too. So like the Shavers injury is like an underlying like important injury, not because Shavers was going to go out and have 100 yards. It's just he's by far their best run blocker, and Gabe Davis is a good run blocker. They're both lost those guys.
Yeah, and that has led to people talking about more heavy personnel, but you question that because, again, Kincaid's not healthy.
Kincaid can't block either.
He can't block either, and we would see Hawes out there instead of Kincaid.
Right.
So it's one of those things. Speaking of that running game, Ty Johnson's still not practicing. We had hoped we would get more receiving work for James Cook last week, especially in that tough matchup. That did not come to fruition. We saw Ray Davis take over a lot of those snaps, so that's disappointing if you were hoping for an extended James Cook run out, especially since you've already talked about this is a tough matchup for him. And so it'd be nice to get some receiving work on the edge of that, but I don't think we're going to get that here unless they kind of change the way that they approached last week.
Yeah, 100%. Says we saw him last week. James Cook did his only run a route on 44% of the dropbacks. It just all of the work that Ty Johnson had just got handed over basically to Ray Davis. So, and this is a tough spot. Like, Denver does not give up production to running backs out of the backfield. They only 14% of the receptions they've allowed this season have gone to running backs. It's the lowest rate in the league, which is surprising because they're a quick pressure team, right? Like, usually you associate quick pressure with more running back receptions, but that hasn't been the case with the Broncos. And I wonder if that just has a lot to do with, like, these guys have to block more against the Broncos as well. But I'm curious to see if they dial back the blitzing. So that's like the key for Vance Joseph here. I think they need to get home without blitzing.
All right, let's move on to the next game on Saturday as well. San Francisco at Seattle. It's a 45.5 point total. The Seahawks -7. And when you look at this game, just like from the overarching point, you talk about how much can we go back in the previous matchups. But the previous matchups between these two teams in a game that mattered was just 2 weeks ago. And it's really hard to get that game out of your head, especially with, unfortunately, the 49ers suffered another massive loss on offense with the injury to George Kittle. It's really difficult to see what the offense was in week 18 and then look and say, all right, well, what are they going to do against the Seahawks defense now? And I mean, we have to say, what Kyle Shanahan and Brock Purdy were able to do last week and how Shanahan was able to design these big play shots to Demarcus Robinson of all people, and those big plays, and obviously the Jennings touchdown, all of that, ultimately won them the game, and good on them. But can they find that magic in this situation against a team that knows them? I don't know. It's a really tough spot here for the 49ers.
Right. And the offense really wasn't even good last week. It was, they just had some timely plays. Obviously, the first drive, you had the big gain to Demarcus Robinson. They had a 45-yard completion to Juwan Jennings, and then the Jennings touchdown play. But the 49ers really struggled to just sustain drives in that game. And that's
why I say the big plays won them the game, because if those shot plays are what changed the game, and then obviously the Eagles doing what the Eagles do, unfortunately. But the Seahawks do that too. In fact, they did that in that Week 18 game. So you're like, all right, well, what are we going to get here?
Yeah, they outgained him 361 to 173. It was the fewest amount of yards San Francisco had in a game this season. But Seattle only punted once in that game, but they went for a 4th down in the opening drive. They didn't get it. They missed 2 kicks and kind of let the 49ers hang around. And that game ended up being a little bit tighter than it was. But it's basically going to have to be the same blueprint, though, for the 49ers. Like, they're going to have to keep this game kind of tight, and hopefully they can generate the splash plays that can kind of swing this game in their favor. We did see them lose another starter on defense in Jair Brown. Maybe they get Fred Warner back. We kind of were talking about, it's like, oh, they kind of told us it was going to be the NFC Championship game at the earliest, but now we're seeing these videos of just Fred Warner jumping around and doing so. Like, it seems like he's at least pushing to want to play as well. But
Keep
this is
away
a spot
from the power plant. Keep them away from the power plant and everything.
But this is a spot too where, like, it's going to have to be a similar layout, though, where the 49ers kind of keep the opponent under 20 to win this game. Like, they're not going to win a game where they're going in the 30s. If they have 30 on Seattle, they're not winning this game, like we talked about last week. Mike McDonald against Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy 49ers have scored 19 points, more than 19 points in one of the 5 games against a Mike McDonald defense. Brock Purdy has a 45.7% success rate against Mike McDonald, below his 50.4% career success rate against everyone else, 38% success rate when these teams met in Week 18. He has 8 career games with success rate under 40%. 2 have come against Mike McDonald. In those 5 matchups against Mike McDonald, Brock Purdy's done for 7.2 yards per pass attempt, 6 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, a 79.7% rating. Against everyone else, he has a 102.6% rating, 8.5 yards per pass attempt, a 6% touchdown rate. So it's like, like Mike McDonald's thrown a wrench in this offense. And when you remove George Kittle from this offense, just such a key piece in the run game and in the passing game, it's just like, how do the 49ers kind of get over again? It feels like they've just been kind of pulling this out with house money. They're going to need Seattle to score under 20 in this game for sure. And that's how it's going to be. Brock Purdy is 4-0 at Lumen Field. Like, that's what people kind of glom onto. So it's going to have to be another tight game. And to be fair, the Seattle scored fewer than 18 points twice this year, and both were the 49ers games. So they're going to need to kind of pull this out again and keep this a really low scoring game.
As for the receivers for San Francisco, I mean, it seems like Ricky Pearsall is going to be back this week. Does that matter? Probably not, based on everything that we've seen so far this season. You mentioned they're going to be without Kittle. We've talked a lot about what that does in the run game throughout the season when Kittle was in or out, what that meant for Christian McCaffrey as a runner, and then also as a receiver. Though we should see a lot more involvement for Christian McCaffrey as a receiver because Kittle's out. Do we get Jake Tongas involved? We've talked about the lesser of evils against the Seattle defense might be tight end. Can we see him involved? We get another Demarcus Robinson just out of left field. Like, where are the heroes coming from this team? I think is a fair question.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a big Christian McCaffrey high usage game, through the air. I mean, just on the outside, I mean, Seattle has allowed the fewest yards per target and yards per catch to wide receivers. Since week 5, Puka Nacua is the only wide receiver to hit 100 yards against them. All the 49ers receivers struggled in that Week 18 game. Obviously, they didn't have Pearsall. Pearsall is their downfield guy. So, like, him being on the field, at least from a tactical leverage stance, matters. Like, you still have to account for Ricky Pearsall vertically. So him being on the field at least helps, even if it's not a huge game for him in the box score. I'm not going to pull a lot from his 100-yard game from the Week 1 because we've seen Seattle just basically, like, their defense now from where it was at the front of the year is just so different. So I think we're going to see, like, a lot of Christian McCaffrey, and, like, we've seen his splits without George Kittle kind of really be, shifted towards him being really high used in the passing game. Almost a dead 50-50 split with Kittle with Kittle on and off the field this season. 277 routes with Kittle on the field, 266 routes with Kittle off the field this year. And with Kittle off the field, he goes from 1.5 yards per out run. Christian McCaffrey is the 2.14. He had 6 receiving touchdowns with Kittle off the field this year, 3 with him on. And he was targeted on 22% of his routes with Kittle off the field, and it goes up to 28%. So 25.9% of the receptions allowed by Seattle have gone to running backs. It's the highest rate in the league. I think we're going to see Christian McCaffrey approach double-digit targets in this game, be a high target, because he's not going to really run the football either. They're going to hand it off to him, but he's not going to run the ball effectively because with Kittle off the field as well, we've seen, those big splits in terms of rushing efficiency with Christian McCaffrey as well. So don't expect him to really run the football. We'll probably see Juszczyk involved in the passing game. And then you brought up Tonjes. And Tonjes in these last 4 games without Kittle has had 9 targets, 7 targets, 11 targets, 5 targets. So those are the little triumvirate of guys. I think those guys are going to be hyper involved in this game. A lot of Brock Purdy getting the football out of his hands to these guys near the line of scrimmage.
Speaking of that, I thought it was interesting, some of the stats you had in the worksheet about Sam Darnold and how we've seen a change in how they are attacking defenses over the back half of the season, just throwing shorter, getting the ball out of Darnold's hands, probably, I would assume, trying to avoid some of the mistakes that he has made this year from an interception perspective, because even when he was throwing, he was running hot and they were scoring a lot of points, he was still making mistakes. He was still throwing interceptions. They pulled him back from that. Was that, hey, we're in a good spot here in the playoffs, they're going to let him loose? Or is that more like just what we want to do moving forward? I don't know. Either way, JSN is going to get a lot of targets, but we would like some of those targets at least to be down the field to really hit that ceiling outcome for JSN that we were getting, in the first half of the season.
And I do think it pulls from 2 avenues. I think that obviously Seattle was so dominant in terms of splash play ability early in the season, and it was largely with one player, Jackson Smith-Njigba, and a lot of teams I think started to calibrate for that. And then the adjustment that Clint Kubiak made was like, well, this is our best player, I'm going to get him the football. So they found different ways to get Jackson Smith-Njigba the football. But you brought up over the opening 11 games of the season, Sam Darnold was number 1 in the NFL in yards per pass attempt, 9.3 yards per pass attempt. Over that period, he was 2nd in air yards per throw, and he was 4th in rate of throws 20 yards or further downfield at 14.8%. Since then, he is 16th in yards per pass attempt, 7.1 yards. He is 30th in air yards per pass attempt, 5.9 air yards per pass attempt. And he has the lowest rate of downfield throws in the NFL, 5%. And it's not just one, if you look at his rate of downfield throws on a per game level, his 6 lowest downfield throw rates this season have all come these past 6 weeks. It's not like there's one from like week 3 and something was boosted. It's like very tried and true. Like there's 6 lowest games have come over the stretch. He's thrown just 27.4% of his passes 10 or more yards downfield over that stretch. That's 27th in the NFL. Prior to that, it was 39.3%. It was 2nd in the NFL. So they still are getting Jackson Smith-Njigba the football. Like if you still look even over this span, I mean, he still is just like a massive target rate, and he's got a massive still share of air yards. Now the air yards are still just not like the prairie yard types, the downfield throws, but they are still accumulating in terms of targets. So that's just a testament, I think, to the type of receiver Jackson Smith-Njigba is. He can win in all avenues, and Seattle's adjusted still by saying we're going to get our best player the football. No matter what you do defensively. And that's but it has boosted up Sam Darnold in terms of efficiency, and it's boosted him protecting the football because, when you're not pushing the ball down the field, you're throwing throws that have a higher success rate. And his interception rate has gone from 2nd worst in the NFL to middle of the pack, 16th, which is huge because when you look at the structure of the Seattle defense, this defense is so good, and the run game's gotten going the back half of the year. And you're literally saying, like, dude, you cannot lose these games. Like, we have too good of a complete team. And I also think like part of that's played into it as well.
Speaking of, other pass catchers here other than JSN, are there any that we can put any stock in? Like at some point you might have thought about AJ Barner, but it looks like Elijah Arroyo will be back this week, at least. Again, we recorded this on Thursday morning, so we don't have the full injury picture, but it seems like he'll be back this week. And that really even takes Barner out of the equation, I would say, based on kind of the route rates that we had seen, especially Fred Warner is back. You're not going to like that tight end matchup as much. Shaheed's not getting targets. Kupp just doesn't get a ton of targets, doesn't score touchdowns. Like it really seems like there's nobody else really to reach out for in this passing game.
Yeah, we've seen basically they've used Shaheed since they've made that trade as more of like a contributor on special teams. He did run a route on 70% of the dropbacks in the week 18 matchups. Maybe that's Joe before. Like he would be like a guy, like you'd say, like for the hell of it, like you throw him in one of these DFS lineups because he
we can get one
possessed this, like
target.
the
Yeah,
per
one
target
target.
upside.
Yeah.
And you get the double dip a little bit because the special team stuff. Like,
Yeah,
it's like, all right, well, maybe he makes his play on special teams too. He would be like a guy, like I say, like he takes a complete blind step of faith because over the 9 games with Seattle, he has 15 catches, 188 yards. But like he's the type of player that could have like a huge play. So he'd be the one guy I'll at least to like kind of keep on my board and say like, all right, if he's going to make a play, it would be here.
Speaking of that backfield, I think we have to talk about it a little bit. They had a ton of success in the last meeting, but obviously it's the same problem we've had with Seattle backfield all season, is that this split backfield makes it tough. Charbonnet is going to get the work around the goal line. Kenneth Walker, I would say, is a better bet for big plays, although we've seen Charbonnet make a lot more big plays than he was early in the season over the past few weeks. This is a really interesting spot just because of the success that these players can have, specifically Kenneth Walker with outside zone, which is something that San Francisco really struggles to stop. And so when you're talking about the pass catchers with Seattle, you also have to think about this running game and think, all right, so if we don't expect San Francisco's offense to have a ton of success, because they haven't, and it's a very good defense, and we think that the Seattle running game could be really good, do we just get 40 combined carries out of these two? And that's kind of where this game goes. And we have more of like a snuffing out of the 49ers than really just like an explosive kind of game environment.
And that's where they beat him up in that week 18 matchup. Both backs had 20 touches. Charbonnet had 97 yards, Walker 133, but it was Walker or Charbonnet had the long touchdown. He had the 27-yard touchdown run. He's been typically more the goal line guy, but the back half of the year, Charbonnet has been a lot more efficient and a lot more explosive, and it's really allowed them to just kind of like split these guys and use them in tandem, although they're still just giving Charbonnet all the short yardage stuff. And the 49ers, even last week, they did bow up a little bit after the early Saquon Barkley run, but still gave up 100 yards to Saquon Barkley. They've allowed 5.4 yards per carry to running backs on outside zone runs with Michael Williams off the field. That's 30th in the NFL, the lowest success rate in the NFL. And that's where Seattle had their success in that last matchup. 15 outside zone runs combined for Walker and Charbonnet, 5.4 yards per carry in that game. Walker does have the higher rate of outside zone runs, but we can see Charbonnet still using that capacity as well. So that's where like the 49ers have to get enough stops. It's like they have to find a way to force Darnold into more dropbacks and then maybe get some more of those mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, if they get Warner back, that obviously changes the complexion as well. So lots of moving parts here, and obviously they know that they've had that struggle the last matchup. Do they do some things? Robert Saleh is a very good defensive coordinator. Do they do some things to try to pull that back? So yeah, a lot of interesting stuff there. A lot more about this game available as part of the worksheet. And remember, you can get all of Rich's worksheet previews for this week, as well as our betting recommendations for this week for 60% off using promo code SAVE60. So head to sharp.football, check that out. Also, remember, we're doing a lot more content before we get here to the Super Bowl. So make sure you subscribe wherever you're finding us. All right, Houston at New England, 41 point total, lowest point total of the weekend. Patriots -3. Actually, it's fallen to 40.5 now that I'm looking at my odds jam board. So we're even getting a little bit of under action here. As we head into the playoffs, people talked a lot about the Patriots schedule, which is fair, I think, as we were talking about, how good they were. But their defense is healthier now as we get into this. We talked about that last week with Milton Williams already back, and I mentioned Robert Spillane and how important I thought that return was for their run defense getting back to where it was. We think it's good based on personnel, especially if Christian Gonzalez can play. Again, we're recording on Thursday morning, but it seems like he's trending towards playing. So I think we can operate under the assumption that he's going to clear protocol and play. And so you look at all that and you go, okay, well, I think this defense is good. And I think the better question after what we saw from CJ Stroud last week is, does the schedule actually even get tougher here? Or are we kind of in a similar situation that the Patriots faced last week with Justin Herbert? Are they just going to be able to really smother this offense and get Stroud nervous, have him make mistakes? Probably not 5 fumbles again. I would put the under on 5 fumbles. That would be my guess. But can they do that to this offense as well, right? And so I think we're kind of in a similar spot to as we were with the Patriots last week.
Yeah, I would agree. Also too, like, the courtroom meme guy, the guy that stands up and has the take their answer. Beating opponents that you're supposed to win is actually a sign of being a good team.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, it turns out that's great.
I feel too like, the Patriots defense kind of disrespected, especially because they just invested so much into that side of the ball, and like they have really good personnel players. Obviously, you add Milton Williams, they had Christian Gonzalez, Carlton Davis, Robert Spillane. Marcus Jones is a really good player. Jalen Hawkins, like they've got talent on that side of the ball, and I feel like that kind of gets overlooked because both of these defenses are so good, and obviously the Houston one gets a ton of respect nationally because they've kind of been this, deservedly, more than deservedly, absolutely. But the Patriots, I believe, are more of a complete team than I think anyone gives them credit for. The run game's been better the back half of the year. The defense is good. The game doesn't have to be all about Drake May, and I think the first round of the playoffs showed that. Like structurally, this is a more complete team and a more balanced team than anyone gives them credit for. I think they are a more balanced team than Houston either, even though I would say the best unit is the Houston defense. But I think, if you're talking about balance, though, I think that, the offense for the Patriots is better than the offense for Houston. And then probably a little bit of maybe an edge on special teams to the Houston side. But the run game is better on the New England side. It's just, can they run against Houston, right? That's going to be the thing, is can you get any type of traction running the football against this Houston defense? And I don't know if they can. So it might put a little bit more of the onus on Drake May. But if the Houston offense minus Nico Collins isn't pushing them, it does set up to play them in a game like last week where it's like, try not to make mistakes. I think one of the interesting things for the New England side, though, especially in this matchup, is Drake May is a player that likes the big game hunt. Like, he wants to make big plays. And when you make big plays, you want to hold the football. He is 28th in time per throw from the snap, 2.91 seconds after the snap time to throw. He's thrown the ball within 2.5 seconds of the snap. We call quick rhythm throws on 35% of his dropbacks. That's 31st in the NFL. Now, he can still scramble, and Houston is 25th in scrambling yards allowed per game, but it also will lead to negative plays. When pressured, Drake May 27th in sack rate. We saw him take 5 sacks on Sunday night. He has a 14.3% sack rate when holding the ball on those throws 2.5 seconds or longer. That's 27th in the NFL. And when opponents have held the ball against Houston, this is when they've created all their havoc plays. On those throws over 2.5 seconds from the time snap, they're second in completion rate, 46% completion rate. Third in yards per pass attempt, 6.7 yards per pass attempt, and they have a 15% sack rate when they hold the ball. Opponents hold the football against them. You want to get the ball out quick against Houston. And are we going to see Drake May do that? So it does change a little bit of the structure of this offense a little bit. So I'm very curious to see how Josh McDaniels really adjusts in this defense. Remember Drake Mays too, like I said, we can't really pull a lot from these things, but his first career start did come against this Houston defense in New England last year and did find his way to 3 passing touchdowns and 20 fantasy points in a blowout win still for the Texans.
Yeah, and I think to your point, like last week they played a really good defense. The Chargers were a really good defense, but the Chargers, and they still got there. They still, as you mentioned, sacked May 5 times, right? Mm-hmm. And so it was 2
fumbles.
Exactly. It was a performance in which May was still reacting to that pressure, and the Chargers are nowhere. Like the Chargers are good defense, and I think they're like mid-pack in pressure rate, but they're not close to where the Texans are in terms of that ability to get pressure and to get pressure without the blitz. The Texans are 4th in pressure rate when not blitzing this year at 38.6%. So they are a team that can get there without sending extra players, which obviously makes sense. We think about Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson and just the options that they have there. And so, yeah, it is another test for May. But as you said, if the offense on the other side isn't pushing them, and we'll get to what are they doing without Nico Collins? Because again, as we record right now on Thursday morning, it doesn't seem like Collins is going to clear the protocol. Then that allows them to lean more into the running game, maybe some shorter passes, maybe try to get Stephon Diggs more involved, who we saw him play more snaps last week as we wanted to see. We didn't see the box score success that came out of that, but we did at least see him play more snaps. Can they get him more involved in this game? I guess it's the revenge game for Stephon Diggs. I don't know. Does he consider it a revenge game? I'm not sure.
How much revenge does Stephon Diggs need?
Well, we're going to leave that one alone after
after
the current news stories. But it's terms of the backfield. You mentioned New England's backfield has been running better. That's true. It seems like Ramondre Stevenson is the guy you want. He's the one that's certainly getting more involved, even though Travion Henderson, you might think, that's the big play guy, obviously, for them. Although Stevenson in the receiving game has been making those big plays. Everything from Stevenson from a receiving game, we talked about this yesterday, actually, you and I, feels kind of fluky what we're getting from him, and that he just keeps making these big plays in the receiving game, but he's doing it. He's getting used more often. He's definitely the guy I think you want in this rushing attack, if that's what you're choosing to attack, how you're choosing to attack this game.
Well, I mean, yeah, everything that Ramondre Stevenson is doing right now is not sustainable on running back levels. I mean, his last 6 games, he's averaging 9 yards per touch. Like, running backs don't average 9 yards per touch.
I can't remember the number. I looked it up yesterday. We were talking about it. Was it 11 yards a catch he's averaging or something like that?
Yeah, and it's not even just the long catches. I mean, he's over 5 yards per carry in each of the past 6 weeks over that stretch. So it's like he's just running pure, and this is a matchup. And what's funny is, like, Henderson hasn't even been bad. Like, Henderson's averaging 5.5 yards per touch, which is like within reason for running backs. Like, that's a high end mark for a running back.
Yeah,
like mid 5s. But it looks like he's been significantly worse than Stevenson, because Stevenson's averaging 9 yards per touch. It's like, oh man, what's happening to Travion Henderson? It's like he's like, I've been fine, man. Like, this other guy's just going nuclear. But I don't believe this backfield's going to have that kind of success that we've seen them have in recent weeks. That's what makes this matchup kind of interesting. Houston's allowing 4.5 yards per touch to running backs. That's 7th in the NFL, 2nd in yards per carry to running backs. They don't give up explosives in the run game. They're 2nd in rate of runs allowed of 10 or more yards to running backs. Running backs have a touchdown or first down or a touchdown on 18.1% of their rushing attempts against Houston. That's the 2nd lowest rate in the league. They will give up some catches to receivers, so maybe that's your thing if you're chasing the Ramondre stuff. But again, like, you're not going to get 11 yards per catch. The Patriots are just a tough team to diagnose for like a prop bets or DFS and stuff, because it's a sum of parts. Last week their leading rusher was Drake May, and their leading receiver was Ramondre Stevenson. Like, they're going to use a lot of these guys. They're going to rotate guys behind Diggs. You're going to see a lot of Kayshon Boutte, Demarion Douglas will get mixed in, Kyle Williams, Efton Chisholm, Hunter Henry. All these guys are going to get involved. And they're going to need all these guys to contribute against this just elite Houston defense. So it's very tough to kind of glom on to any of these guys from like individual upside angles. It's going to be more of everyone kind of come together and create, and in context of creating yards versus the Houston Texans, like expecting the New England Patriots to have like 400 yards of offense versus the Texans is a tall ask. They were a good offense against the Chargers last week. People are like, oh, they didn't have a lot of yards. I was like, that was the 3rd most yards the Chargers allowed all year. It was the 2nd most passing yards the Chargers allowed all year. It's like, this is what happens in playoff football. Like, things get tightened up, especially when you incorporate that strength of schedule. But I would argue that the Patriots did have an effective offense. They just have to protect the football and avoid the negative plays better than they did last week, which is also going to be a tall order against this defense that's just a little more aggressive than the Jesse Menard defense.
And I mean, there's a reason, like, speaking to that, there's a reason this is the lowest total on the slate. It's not even close that it's the lowest total. And also, as I mentioned, as we've been recording, it's gone down by 0.5 point. So there's a reason why
those 5 minutes.
Exactly. There's a reason why all of that is the case. Part of that is that, again, as I mentioned, it seems unlikely Nico Collins is going to play. Obviously, we had we're going to call him Christian Kirk, Stephen A. We had the Christian Kirk unexpected explosion here from him. If Nico Collins isn't there, we know that opens up more opportunities for Jaden Higgins, who has had success this year at times when he's been given the opportunity. We know Xavier Hutchinson's going to be on the field. We know that Dalton Schultz is going to be on the field. And so you look at that and you go, all right, well, who am I picking out of this group? None of them, like, I'm not that excited about any of them. If Christian Gonzalez is here, you're specifically not as excited about the outside receivers. So it is kind of a tough spot here for who are we picking in this passing game if we're really trying to play someone there.
Another unit that's probably going to be similar to the New England side, right? Like, it's going to be a very kind of sum of parts offensive game plan, I think, for the Houston Texans. Schultz probably stands out the most from like a playing time, like target opportunity perspective versus the opponent, because tight ends have 27% of the targets against the Patriots, the 3rd highest rate in the league. They are like middle of the pack in terms of allowing efficiency on those targets. So, and Dalton Schultz is also the type of player that needs a lot of targets. So, like, he needs volume to kind of get over. So it's probably him from the stance of like a target upside stance. Higgins is going to play more. They reluctantly didn't want to play him last week. We did see in that opening round of playoffs, like, they were just going to play they weren't going to play the rookies. It was going to be Nico Collins, Xavier Hutchinson, and Christian Kirk as the primary three. And then when Nico Collins left, like Higgins is the backup for that role. And he was on the field 100% of the dropbacks after Collins left the field. So he's going to play by default because that's the position he plays more than so. But then we're going to still see Hutchinson out here, who's very hit or miss. And then Christian Kirk had more receiving yards on Monday night than he had his previous 10 games. So it's really tough to lean on that. And then when you factor in the cornerbacks of the New England Patriots, like these guys are all very strong, Christian Gonzalez, Marcus Jones, and Carlton Davis. Like you would give the edge heads up in terms of isolation. Like these are better players than those wide receivers. So I do believe it's going to have to be Dalton Schultz and just some timely plays. I think, like I said, it's a lot of the Spider-Man mirror match in this game. You're not going to see, I think, a lot of big crooked numbers or a box score unless someone makes like a huge play in this game. It's going to be a lot of just you add it up with these pass catchers.
We also are coming off a great Woody Marks game, but I kind of hinted at this. There are some really negative matchup numbers for Woody Marks. I would encourage you, because we're going to move on to the last game, so I'd encourage you to head and check out the worksheet about Woody Marks and kind of some of the concerns we have about him this week heading into this matchup. All right, let's handle the final game here, a fun game. This is a really exciting game. It'll be a nice, probably palate cleanse, although, it's a playoff game. We could go wild in the Texans and Patriots. Both those defenses can make big plays. We could have a fun game for sure there. But this is looking like a palate cleanse with the Bears and the Rams. Rams traveling to Chicago. Rams are 3.5-point favorite on the road. That total is 48.5, which is our highest total of the weekend. I kind of think that total's a little light, just personally. I expect this game to really pop off. And when I'm thinking about this game, I think back to that Packers game, and first of all, how much it hurt me from a bankroll perspective, that Packers game, and I will never forgive you, Matt LaFleur. But I also think we got the full Caleb Williams experience in that game, just the absolute Caleb Williams experience. They're in the divisional round, so obviously he's good enough to lead a team here, right? He's good enough to at least have an solid team. But then you think about the plays we saw last week and his ability to make plays out of structure and push the ball downfield at a Dunze fourth down, like all of that. You put all that together and you wonder if he was just more consistent from a down-to-down perspective, we'd really have something here for Williams. Will he ever get there? Is that playmaking just there because he's always looking for it, which I think is something that you could say. I just find Caleb Williams so interesting, and I think he's a player that we're going to have a lot of debates over on Twitter and in bars over the next 5 years, because he's just one of those fun players that he's going to make crazy plays. He's going to have that DJ Moore touchdown in overtime. He's going to have that Roma Dunze play. And then you're just going to see him randomly miss a wide open Colston Loveland. You're going to say, what are we doing? But that's the Caleb Williams experience, and just appreciate it. Love it for as long as you get to see it. That's how I have to feel about Caleb Williams.
Well, in general, this game is so exciting on paper. I mean, you got two teams that are just great at creating chunk plays. The Rams.
I write an ode to Caleb Williams.
I'm going to get.
I can't even think
talk about the game in general, though. First,
there's an ode to Caleb Williams, and you want to. I'm expressing my love for this man. And all right, continue.
I mean, it sounded like it was half love. It was like,
fair enough. That's as much love as I could muster, to be fair. My wife talks about that with the therapist, but we'll move on from that.
But in general, when you talk about this game potentially going over and being exciting, it's because both these offenses they're first and second in plays per game of 10 or more yards. The Rams are second in plays per game of 20 more yards. The Bears are fourth, and these teams don't have negative plays. I mean, the Bears are number one in the league in plays per game that result in a sack or a turnover, and the Rams are second. So that's what we love. That's how you get overs, right? You get splash plays and you don't turn the ball over, although that can lead to overs too if you have those turnovers. When you talk about Caleb and just the Bears in general trying to build this plane out of the fourth quarter in general, we've already seen Caleb make like a massive stride in terms of like pressure to sack rate and avoiding sacks. And what he's doing under pressure is he's bypassing these checkdowns, right? He invites some of the pressure because he holds the football, like we talked about Drake May, creates some of his own pressure. But he's bypassing like these easier throws that could boost his completion percentage, because we always talk about the off-target rate and then the low completion percentage with him. But he's not taking these plays that could just elevate his completion percentage. He's going for these plays that have these lower chances of success but larger payoff, larger boom. When pressured, he only has been in the pocket for 40% of his dropbacks. It's the lowest rate in the NFL. He's averaging 13 air yards per pass attempt under pressure. That's fourth in the NFL, because he's buying time and he wants to create big plays. He's saying, hey, if the pressure is on me, now we're in kind of a jailbreak situation. and maybe like we can create and get some stuff downfield out of structure. And that's what he wants to do. So if he ever gets to a point where he trusts his eyes as much as his arm, that's kind of like what I wrote in the worksheet, the phrase, like, dude, he's like, that's where, if those two things ever get married, like he's going to be a nightmare for, I think, for teams. And that's like what Mahomes does, right? Like Mahomes has that combination.
Yeah. It's really, we are talking about, can you become Patrick Mahomes, which that
yes. Can difficult. You become Patrick Mahomes?
That seems like it's asking a lot of the young man. I would say.
But that's the thing with if Caleb Williams is he starts taking the free squares, then you marry that with the big plays. That's where he gets a little bit crazy here. But this matchup in particular, the Rams over the past 7 weeks, like this defense has been kind of, bleeding out a little bit, and especially in the pass game. I mean, they're 17th in completion rate over that span, 23rd in yards per pass attempt, 27th in yards per completion, 28th in touchdown rate over that span. They're 30th in yards per play over the past 7 games. So this environment has everything, unless we get some weird weather stuff, I think, where like the wind is like more here than the cold weather. This game has all the ingredients to shoot out.
Yeah, Akilo Witherspoon back on injured reserve, so they're not going to have him again, who obviously they didn't have him for most of last week as well. That I think we're going to see more what Darius Williams will step in. And so, yeah, there are lots of reasons to think this Rams defense is not what we had hoped it would be. But the thing the Rams defense can do is get pressure still. They can get pressure. And we've seen, as you mentioned, Williams, even though he can escape that pressure and hasn't been taking as many sacks, he still has struggled from like a throw-to-throw consistency against that pressure with just the way he plays. From their pass catching group, Colston Loveland has arrived. I don't know how much we need to talk about Loveland, although I did think in the worksheet your point about the fact that you can't really look at him as a tight end matchup if you're looking at tight end matchups just because of the way he's used, and he's used in the slot and he's used out wide, which I did think was interesting. I'd encourage you to go read the worksheet to hear about that. For the receivers, we saw Dunze back. We saw him run a lot of routes. Obviously, he made the big play, but it was still the same problem we've had with Dunze, that he's not getting the targets. Luther Burden, we see his route rate go down, but when he's on the field, he draws targets, even though, there was maybe a miscommunication, we should say, with Burden that led to some concerns in the first half. So DJ Moore, apparently all he does now is catch touchdown. He is our new Chris Carter. Congratulations, DJ Moore. So you look at all of this, and it is tough to parse this receiving group outside of, this new version of Colston Loveland.
Yeah, Moore's going to play the most snaps. We know that. Burden's going to have the highest target rate per route run. Those are like the
two passes. So there you go. Yeah. We've got it figured out.
Yeah. Dunze does have some interesting matchup notes. I think if you're willing to go back to him in like a DFS perspective, because he ran a route on 72% of the dropbacks, like a solid rate. That's not where he was pre-injury, but that's probably where he's going to stay with Burden coming on to the end of the year. And then Dunze is probably not going to log a full practice probably all week playing through this like kind of stress fracture. But that's where you talked about Kelly Williams being out, like Coker having success last week, Ted McMillan having success. Like this is where you want to attack the Rams on the perimeter. Over the past 7 games, I mean, they're 25th in receptions allowed per game to wide receivers, 31st in yards allowed to wide receivers per game. They've allowed the most touchdowns to wide receivers over that span. And it's these outside receivers, 28th in yards per target, 30th in fantasy points allowed. And like that's where Dunze plays. So he does take again that step of faith, but he is out there in the area where we want to target the Rams at least.
We have a split backfield in both of these situations. We kind of have similar vibes in both of these situations, although the Rams here are in a much better spot. Their duo of Kyren Williams and Blake Corum are a much better spot from a matchup perspective, and have just, had a ton of success, I would say, in recent weeks. We saw them have success last week, even though they didn't, that game was closer than we anticipated. We still saw them have success. And so I think you're feeling pretty good about where you are, even with less work for Kyren Williams. And then Blake Corum, we've seen that explosiveness this year, and this is obviously a good matchup for him as well. So I think heading into this, you're feeling a lot better about that Rams tandem than what we might get out of that Bears tandem, just because with Monangai, it's, empty calories, and with Swift, is he going to get a touchdown is kind of where we are.
And we were all over it last week and kind of saying like, hey, look for the Rams to play more 11 personnel, really reduce their play action rates. And that's exactly what happened. They played a lot more out of shotgun. Stafford was under center for his 3rd lowest rate. They used play action at their 2nd lowest rate. This week, I think we're going to see them shift back and play more heavy against the Bears. And that's going to really lead to kind of the upside for this backfield, because I think they're going to play those heavy sets. They really put the Bears in a quandary, because the Bears losing TJ Edwards, who's like their best dual purpose linebacker, like combination of effectiveness in the run game and the pass game. Edmonds is their best pass like coverage guy, but he's not as good in the run game. So if they're going to play 13 personnel, it puts the Bears in a bind, because if the Bears want to play heavy, then they're just going to get play action to death. The Bears have been brutal against play action all year. One of the worst defenses in the NFL. And this is why Ben Johnson's going for it on 4th and 5, from his own 28-yard line. He understands.
He understands. God bless you, Ben Johnson, for knowing what your team is. Like, just absolutely.
He understands, man. He understands like this, and especially, and that was against like the Packers. Like they might even be more aggressive here, because like I said, but when they're going to these heavy sets, the Bears, if they're going to come play heavy, they're going to get play action to death, and you're going to get a lot of Puka Nacua and the tight ends in the pass game. And then if they choose to play nickel, they lose their best defender in terms of being able to like play the run and pass, and then these running backs are just going to go nuts if you choose to play them with lighter fronts in this 13 personnel. Obviously they're number 1 and number 2, Williams and Quorum, in rate of runs out of 13 personnel. And if you choose to play nickel, they both average over 5 yards per carry against light fronts against nickel in those 13 personnel runs. So that, I just think we're going to see the Rams go back to that heavy sets, because it really puts the Bears in a box.
And this is also, we're talking about the run game advantages. This is also a smash spot for, you mentioned the play action stuff for Matthew Stafford. This is a smash spot, obviously, for Puka Nacua, because there's no such thing as a bad matchup for Puka Nacua. Devontae Adams came back last week, and even though the per target efficiency wasn't what we had hoped, he obviously got the targets that we wanted. He played the snaps that we wanted. Like, I don't really know how much there is to talk about this passing game. Yeah. It's just a question of, do they get enough opportunities? Are they pushed on the other side by Chicago? Because if they are, then Matthew Stafford's going to have a big game. Puka Nacua is going to have a big game, and Devontae Adams could catch 2 touchdowns. That's kind of where we are with this passing game in this matchup in this spot.
Yeah, it's back to being just like the 2-man bet. I mean, Devontae Adams had 31% target share coming back. Puka was over 40%. We know where the ball's going. McVay's consistently able to get these guys the football too as well. And I mean, the Bears haven't stopped any wide receivers this year. I know there was a lot of like talk like when they get guys back, and Kyler Gordon, and it just hasn't mattered who they've had in their
Kyler Gordon, who I think is the only player on the Bears defense that Kirk Herbstreit knows, because he brought him up at least 30 times. That has to be, I think that's the only player he knows on there. When was Kyler Gordon in college? That's how we judge how much Kirk Herbstreit knows about a player. Anyway, sorry.
But even like Jalen Johnson has been the same player coming back. I mean, you saw it last week. I mean, the Green Bay wideouts combined for 19 catches, 287 yards, and 4 touchdowns.
You mentioned they revived Matthew Golden. You brought Matthew Golden back to life.
Not even revived, just became like life. It was alive. It was alive.
Birthed Matthew Golden.
and like that's a team that does they're like, we use the phrase sum of parts for these wide receiver groups. Like, you condense that now to 2 guys, like 20 catches, 300 yards. We're gonna put that on 2 guys here.
Yeah, I mean, again, there's not a lot of reason to talk about it. This is a smash spot. The thing that keeps either of these guys or Matthew Stafford from hitting is just the Bears struggle in the first 3 quarters, and they don't really turn it on the 4th quarter. We get 30 carries out of Kyron Williams and Blake Corum, and we just don't get the volume. That's, I think, it. And even if we do that, it could still be 280 and 3 for Stafford, and you're feeling pretty good about where those passes are going. All right, that's it for us going through these games. As I mentioned, if you want to get more in depth on any of the players, if there's somebody we didn't talk about, you want more information on, for instance, Zacchaeus. You even put Zacchaeus in this week, bringing back my preseason love, Eliminate Zacchaeus for the worksheet. Head over to sharpfootballanalysis.com. You'll get all of Rich's worksheets. You can also get our betting recommendations for this week for 60% off using promo code SAVE60. Make sure you do that. We appreciate you listening to this point. If you like us to this point, make sure you subscribe wherever you find us, podcast player, or over on YouTube. If you're on YouTube, hit that notification, get notified whenever our videos drop, including Warren Sharp's big preview of the divisional round, which will be releasing shortly after this one does as well. So make sure you hit the notifications for that. For Rich, I'm Ray, and we'll be back to talk with you next week.